How humans became the most feared diplomatic negotiators in the galaxy. The day Earth officially joined the Galactic Confederation should have been momentous. Instead, it was Miranda Reeves' personal nightmare. "Did you seriously just offer them coffee?" hissed her supervisor through their neural comms. "The Arcturian delegate has 3 circulatory systems. Caffeine could kill them." Miranda grimaced, straightening her Navy diplomatic uniform while maintaining her practiced smile. She was 32, with prematurely silver-streaked dark hair that she refused to dye despite the United Earth government's subtle suggestions about appropriate appearance standards. Today, that was the least of her problems. "I was just being polite," she whispered back. "Isn't that what diplomats do?" To Ray. Oh, no. The Arcturian delegate, a 7-foot-tall, blue-scaled humanoid with unsettlingly wide eyes, was backing away from her, its gill-like structures flaring in what Miranda would later learn was the universal alien signal for extreme distress. "The human attempted to poison me," the alien announced to the assembled diplomatic corps, and then maintained unbroken eye contact while suggesting we chat about the weather. Clearly psychological warfare techniques. Miranda's jaw dropped. "I was making small talk." The chamber fell silent. Several alien species simultaneously engaged their emergency breathing apparatus. "The human admits to small talk," whispered a gelatinous being to its neighbor. "They truly are as ruthless as the rumors suggest." Miranda's confusion must have shown on her face because her supervisor quickly pulled her aside. "Miranda, look around. Notice how no one makes eye contact during negotiations. How they never ask personal questions. That's because most sentient species consider direct questioning and sustained eye contact extremely aggressive behaviors." She glanced around the grand hall of the Confederation embassy, noticing for the first time how all the aliens carefully avoided looking directly at each other. "You're telling me that basic human politeness is terrifying to them?" "Not just terrifying, it's considered advanced psychological manipulation. Your attempt at small talk was interpreted as trying to establish dominance through personal interrogation." Miranda ran a hand through her silver-streaked hair. "So, when I asked about their family, you basically threatened their offspring. And when I smiled, you bared your teeth at them. Very threatening." Miranda sighed dramatically. "Well, that explains why they've been calling us Death Welders since they discovered our broadcasts." What happened next would change the course of galactic history. As diplomats scrambled to salvage the situation, an emergency broke out in the neighboring star system. The Flobian and Zoraxian delegations received urgent news that their territorial dispute had escalated to the brink of war. "We need a neutral negotiator immediately," the Confederation arbiter announced. "All our senior diplomats are engaged in the Centauri summit." Miranda, still reeling from her coffee faux pas, didn't realize her supervisor had volunteered her until all eyes and various sensory appendages turned in her direction. "Perfect," said the arbiter. "The human's natural intimidation tactics might be exactly what's needed." And just like that, Miranda Reeves' diplomatic rookie, an apparent terrifying psychological warfare expert, was dispatched to prevent an interstellar war. The journey to the disputed territory gave Miranda exactly 12 hours to learn everything about alien diplomatic protocols, which mostly involved not doing anything that came naturally to her as a human. No eye contact, no personal questions, no smiling, definitely no handshakes. What she didn't realize was that she'd already been given a fearsome reputation. By the time she arrived, rumors had spread that Earth was sending their master negotiator, whose small talk techniques could break the will of any sentient being. The Floblan's turtle-like creatures with luminescent shells visibly trembled when she entered the negotiation chamber. The Zoraxians, vaguely insectoid with metallic exoskeletons, clicked their mandibles nervously. "Let's cut to the chase," Miranda said, forgetting protocol and making direct eye contact with both delegation leaders. "What exactly is the problem here?" Both aliens flinched. The Flobian leader actually retracted partially into its shell. "The human employs direct questioning immediately," whispered a Zoraxian aide too loudly. "Such aggression. We must concede something quickly." And that's how Miranda Reeves accidentally negotiated her first interstellar peace treaty in under 20 minutes, simply by being direct, maintaining eye contact, and at one point casually saying, "Surely we can find a win-win solution here, folks." That phrase win-win solution would later be added to the Galactic Confederation's list of banned psychological warfare terminology. 6 months after Miranda's accidental diplomatic triumph, the United Earth government established the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. Its mission, to harness humanity's apparently terrifying negotiation skills for the benefit of Earth and the greater galactic community. The IDC headquarters in Geneva was an odd mixture of Earth architecture and alien design accommodations. The ceilings were unnecessarily high for humans but perfect for the lanky Procyon ambassadors. The lighting was kept at what humans considered perpetual dusk, to accommodate species with sensitive visual organs. And the cafeteria offered everything from normal Earth cuisine to tanks of ammonia for the Regalian delegates to bathe in. Miranda had been promoted to senior diplomatic trainer, a position she found deeply ironic given her disastrous first contact experience. Her new job was teaching other humans how to weaponize their natural behaviors to maximum diplomatic effect. "I remember," she told her class of 30 diplomatic trainees, "what feels like basic courtesy to us reads as aggressive dominance to most galactic species. Small talk is psychological warfare. Eye contact is a threat display. And for the love of God, never show your teeth unless you're prepared for someone to surrender immediately." Among her trainees was Theo Blackwell, a former corporate negotiator with a reputation for being ruthlessly effective. Tall, with worn brown skin and a perpetually skeptical expression, he was the only trainee who consistently questioned Miranda's methods. "So you're saying we should deliberately make aliens uncomfortable?" he asked during one session. "That seems counterproductive to actual diplomacy." Miranda shook her head. "We're not trying to make them uncomfortable. We're learning when to deploy human directness and when to hold back. It's about controlled application of our natural tendencies." "Sounds manipulative," Theo countered. Says the man who once negotiated a hostile corporate takeover by scheduling meetings during his opponent's lunch hours so they'd be hungry and irritable. Theo had the grace to look embarrassed. "Fair point." And their bickering was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Greel Vox, their alien instructor. Greel Vox resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a jellyfish, with translucent limbs that changed color with their emotions, currently a wary orange. "Today," Greel Vox announced, their voice a melodious series of clicks translated through the room's audio system, "we will practice what you humans call beating around the bush. The art of speaking without directness." Miranda suppressed a smile as her trainees looked confused. "In most galactic cultures," Greel Vox continued, "one never states one's desires openly. This would be considered unspeakably rude. Instead, one hints and suggests, sometimes for days or even months. So, passive-aggressive notes about dirty dishes in the break room, but make it galactic." One trainee joked. Greel Vox's limbs flushed deep purple with confusion. "I do not understand this reference, but it sounds disturbingly direct." The training exercises that followed were absurd by human standards. Trainees had to practice asking for a document by talking about everything except the document itself. They rehearsed negotiations where stating the actual terms was forbidden. They mastered the art of complimenting without actually giving compliments. Theo, to everyone's surprise, excelled at these exercises. "It's just like corporate politics," he explained to Miranda during their lunch break. "Nobody ever says what they actually mean." "I always say what I mean," Miranda countered. "That's why aliens find me terrifying." "And that's why you need people like me," Theo said with a smirk. "Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a scalpel." Their rivalry turned friendship was solidified during the final training exercise, a simulated negotiation with the Veldarian delegation, so famous for being the most indirect communicators in the galaxy. Miranda's direct approach caused the Veldarian simulator to register immediate stress. Theo stepped in, speaking in elaborate metaphors and circuitous sentences that somehow managed to convey meaning without ever stating anything clearly. "Remarkable," Greel Vox commented, their limbs now a pleased pink. Theo has mastered indirect communication, while Miranda has perfected controlled directness. Together, you represent humanity's full diplomatic spectrum. You mean good cop, bad cop, Theo translated. I'm not the bad cop, Miranda protested. Real Vox's translator crackled. In galactic terms, Miranda, you are definitely what humans would call the nuclear option. The Zaxian crisis began, as most galactic conflicts do, with a misunderstanding about cheese. Not literal cheese, of course. The disputed territory between the Zaxian Empire and the Fluvian Republic contained rare gas-producing bacteria that both species considered culturally essential. The Zaxians used it in religious ceremonies, while the Fluvians consumed it as a delicacy. Humans had nicknamed it space cheese due to its pungent aroma and dairy-like processing methods. When both sides began mobilizing fleets, the Galactic Confederation requested Earth assistance. Specifically, they requested Miranda and Theo. Your mission, explained Director Okafor of the IDC, is to prevent all-out war without either side losing face. The Confederation is sending you because, frankly, everyone's terrified of what will happen if humans get involved in an actual galactic conflict. Miranda raised an eyebrow. So they're using fear of us as leverage. Exactly. Your reputation precedes you, especially after that incident with the Arcturian coffee. The diplomatic vessel that transported them to the Zaxian neutral zone was sleek and intimidating by design, another psychological tactic. When they arrived, both the Zaxian and Fluvian delegations were already waiting, visibly nervous. The Zaxians resembled elegant humanoid lizards with feathered crests that changed pattern with their emotions. The Fluvians were short, stocky beings with 4 arms and skin that rippled like water when they spoke. Remember the plan? Theo whispered as they entered. I'll start with indirect communication. Then you come in with the human directness when they're deadlocked. The negotiations began predictably, with both sides talking in elaborate circles, never addressing the actual dispute. The ancestral molecules have always resonated with the heartbeat of Zaxian culture, said the Zaxian ambassador poetically. The nutritional essence flows through Fluvian history like the rivers of our homeworld, countered the Fluvian representative. After 3 hours of this with zero progress, Theo caught Miranda's eye and nodded slightly. It was time for the nuclear option. Miranda stood up suddenly, causing both delegations to flinch. Look, she said, making deliberate eye contact with each leader, this isn't working. You both need the space cheese. Fighting over it will destroy the very thing you're fighting for. So here's what's going to happen. The room fell silent. Several aides activated emergency breathing apparatus, prepared for the stress of direct human negotiation. You're going to establish a joint colony, split the proceeds 50-50, share research to increase production efficiency. And I expect to see a draft agreement in the next hour, or I'll start asking about your families and making small talk about the weather. The threat was clear. The Zaxian ambassador's crest flattened in submission. The human speaks with the directness of a supernova. We will consider these terms. Such terrifying efficiency, murmured the Fluvian representative. We too will consider this arrangement. What happened next entered diplomatic legend. When the drafted agreement hit a snag over administrative control, Miranda deployed an Earth idiom that her translator couldn't properly convert. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face, she told them. The translation rendered this as something like do not sever your breathing appendage to cause facial vengeance, which both species found so disturbingly violent and yet metaphorically apt that they immediately signed the treaty. Later, when they were safely back on their ship, Theo burst into laughter. Did you see their faces when you threatened small talk? I thought the Zaxian minister was going to molt from stress. Miranda couldn't help laughing too. I still don't understand why asking about someone's day is considered more threatening than actual threats. It's because you're forcing them to reveal personal information, Theo explained. In most galactic cultures, that kind of sharing is only done with intimate family units. So every time I ask how's it going, I'm basically asking them to psychologically undress. Pretty much. And that's why humans are now the most feared negotiators in the galaxy. The Zaxian crisis resolution made headlines across Confederation space. The Galactic diplomatic journal ran with human negotiation tactics, effective or ethical. Opinion was divided. But one thing was clear: humans got results. Over the next 2 years, humanity's diplomatic reputation grew to mythical proportions. The Interstellar Diplomatic Corps expanded rapidly, with offices on 17 Confederation worlds and a waiting list of species requesting human negotiators. Miranda found herself promoted to Chief Diplomatic Strategist, with Theo as her second-in-command. And together, they had resolved disputes that had festered for centuries before human involvement. The Orion Trade Partnership, resolved in 6 hours with direct questioning. The Batodiusian succession crisis, fixed with a well-timed "let's circle back to that terrified everyone into agreement. The 3-century war between the Draconis Alliance and the Plejaran Directorate ended when Miranda suggested putting all cards on the table, a phrase so alarmingly direct that both sides feared what would happen if they didn't comply. Not everyone was pleased with humanity's rising influence. Trade Minister Velcor of the Hadrian Consortium was particularly vocal in his opposition. A tall, spindly being with iridescent scales and 4 piercing eyes, Velcor represented the old guard of galactic politics, those who believed in prolonged, ritualized negotiation. These humans, Velcor declared during a Confederation assembly, are disrupting thousands of years of diplomatic tradition with their barbaric directness. They are not diplomats, they are psychological terrorists. Miranda, sitting in the Earth delegation's booth, merely smiled slightly, causing 3 nearby ambassadors to quickly avert their sensory organs. The results speak for themselves, countered Ambassador Greel Vox, now Earth's staunchest ally. Humans have resolved more conflicts in 2 years than traditional methods achieved in 20. At what cost? Hissed Velcor. They force immediate decisions through intimidation rather than allowing proper contemplation. This is not diplomacy, it's coercion through fear of their bizarre social behaviors. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for the timely interruption of a priority alert. The Nagathi hive mind, one of the oldest and most mysterious civilizations in the galaxy, had requested diplomatic contact after centuries of isolation. The Confederation Council fell silent. The Nagathi were legendary for their complex, hive-based consciousness and impenetrable diplomatic protocols. But previous attempts at negotiation had failed spectacularly. They've requested human negotiators specifically, announced the arbiter, their voice betraying rare surprise. They say they find human directness refreshing. Miranda exchanged glances with Theo. This was unprecedented. Velcor's scales rippled with barely contained outrage. This is absurd. The Nagathi negotiations will require delicacy, tradition, nuance, everything humans lack. I move that we put it to a vote, Greel Vox suggested, their limbs flushing a confident blue. The resulting vote was overwhelming, 78% in favor of sending a human diplomatic team. Miranda and Theo were the obvious choices, with a support team of 3 other experienced human negotiators. As they left the council chamber, Miranda couldn't help noticing Velcor huddled with several other anti-human traditionalists, their voices hushed but their body language agitated. We've made some powerful enemies, Theo noted. Good thing we're terrifying. Then Miranda replied with a grin that sent a nearby aide scurrying for cover. The mission preparations were intensive. The Nagathi hive mind was composed of billions of interconnected organisms sharing consciousness across their home planet. Their concept of self was radically different from individualistic species. Their language had no singular pronouns. Their negotiation style was historically impenetrable, with meanings layered in ways no translator could fully capture. So basically, we're trying to negotiate with an entire planet that thinks with one mind, Miranda summarized during their briefing. And they specifically asked for us, Theo added. Either they genuinely appreciate direct communication, or it's a trap, Miranda finished. But set by whom? She couldn't shake the memory of Velcor's suspicious behavior. As the humans prepared for what might be their greatest diplomatic challenge yet, Miranda couldn't help feeling they were being set up to fail spectacularly. What she didn't know was just how right she was and how thoroughly human their solution would turn out to be. The Nagathi homeworld resembled a massive neural network, even from orbit sprawling, interconnected structures that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. The human diplomatic team was escorted to a specially constructed negotiation chamber designed to accommodate their physiological needs. Remember, Miranda briefed her team, we're dealing with a hive mind. When one Nagathi speaks, it speaks for all. Don't think of them as individuals, but as sensory appendages of a single entity. So no making small talk with just one of them, quipped Theo. Got it. The Nagathi representatives entered, or more accurately, manifested as 5 humanoid forms composed of swirling, iridescent particles. Their voices came simultaneously from all points in the room, a harmonic chorus that the translators rendered into something approximating standard galactic common. We welcome the human directness to our collective, they intoned. Long have we observed your species' communication patterns with interest, fascination, terror. Miranda stepped forward, remembering to keep her hands visible and her smile minimal. We thank you for the invitation and look forward to productive discussions. What followed was the strangest diplomatic encounter in human history. The Nagathi communicated in conceptual blocks rather than linear sentences. They experienced time differently, sometimes responding to questions before they were asked, and their actual demands were buried under layers of collective consciousness references that the translators struggled to interpret. After 6 hours, Miranda called for a break. This isn't working, she told her team in their private chamber. Traditional human directness isn't effective when they experience communication itself differently than we do. And I'm starting to think this whole assignment was a setup, Theo added. Notice how the Confederation observers keep exchanging meaningful glances whenever we struggle? Miranda nodded grimly. Velkor's doing, no doubt. He wants to prove humans can't handle truly complex diplomacy. The team sat in frustrated silence until the youngest diplomat, Raj, spoke up. You know what this reminds me of? My family reunions, dozens of relatives all talking at once, everyone with their own agenda, but somehow coming together over food. Food, Miranda repeated thoughtfully, the universal connector. Are you suggesting we host a dinner party for a planet-sized hive mind? Theo asked incredulously. Not just dinner, Miranda said, a smile spreading across her face, a potluck, with karaoke. The Confederation observers were baffled when the humans requested permission to host a cultural exchange event instead of formal negotiations the next day. The Nagathi, however, agreed immediately, their particle forms rippling with what the translators identified as collective curiosity. The diplomatic vessel's chef worked overtime preparing a selection of Earth cuisines modified to be safely consumed by Nagathi physiology. The recreation room was transformed with soft lighting and a hastily programmed karaoke system featuring songs from across human history. When the Nagathi arrived, they were visibly confused by the informal setting, their particle forms shifting rapidly between colors. Before we continue formal negotiations, Miranda announced, we thought it might help to share how humans build community and understanding. Through shared meals and musical expression, what happened next would become diplomatic legend. The Nagathi, despite having no individual digestive systems, formed temporary structures to sample the human foods. They experienced flavors as collective sensory data, their entire hive mind simultaneously processing the sensation of chocolate cake or spicy curry. This method of information exchange is illuminating. They communicated, their particles glowing with new patterns. You build understanding through shared sensory input. Then came the karaoke. Theo started with an enthusiastic if off-key rendition of Don't Stop Believin' that had the Nagathi particles vibrating in apparent delight. When Miranda convinced the hive mind representatives to try singing, they produced a harmonic, multi-toned version of the song that resonated throughout the chamber. By the end of the night, the Nagathi were teaching humans their own version of musical communication, complex harmonic patterns that conveyed emotional concepts the translators couldn't process. And somewhere between the dessert course and the third karaoke song, the actual negotiation points were resolved with surprising ease. The trade routes through our space will be open to Confederation vessels, the Nagathi announced. We understand now that exchange sharing connection is the human way. The Confederation observers were stunned. Centuries of diplomatic stalemate resolved through potluck dinner and karaoke. As they packed up afterward, Theo nudged Miranda. Velkor's going to be furious. His plan to humiliate us just made human diplomacy look even more effective. Maybe that's our real diplomatic superpower, Miranda reflected. Not intimidation through directness, but connection through shared experience. That, and the fact that no one can resist joining a karaoke sing-along, Theo added with a grin. The headlines across Confederation space were suitably dramatic. Humans revolutionize galactic diplomacy with potluck protocol. Nagathi hive mind signs historic treaty after karaoke diplomacy. Is Earth food the galaxy's new secret weapon? The Confederation Council chamber was packed for the official treaty signing. The Nagathi representatives, now forming more stable, defined shapes after their exposure to human culture, harmonized their agreement, while a stunned audience of diplomats looked on. Velkor, whose scheme to discredit humanity had backfired so spectacularly, sat rigidly in the Hadrian delegation's booth, all four eyes narrowed in barely concealed fury. This marks a new era in Confederation diplomacy, the Arbiter announced. The human approach has proven effective even with the most challenging diplomatic scenarios. Miranda, standing at attention in her formal diplomatic uniform, caught Theo's eye and suppressed a smile. They both knew the truth: their success had been equal parts calculated strategy and complete improvisational chaos, the most human combination possible. In the months that followed, the Earth method of diplomacy was formally codified into Confederation protocol. Traditional elements remained for species who preferred ritualized communication, but human-style directness, now tempered with shared cultural activities, became the standard for addressing urgent situations. The Interstellar Diplomatic Corps expanded its training program to include what they called connection protocols. Alien diplomats reluctantly attended workshops on making eye contact without fleeing in terror. Practice sessions for small talk were conducted under controlled conditions with medical staff standing by. Most revolutionary of all was the introduction of the diplomatic dining hall at Confederation headquarters, a place where representatives from different species could share their culture's foods in a neutral setting. More treaties were negotiated over these meals than in formal chambers. "We've fundamentally changed how the galaxy conducts diplomacy," and Miranda remarked to Theo as they watched a draconian ambassador cautiously attempt to use chopsticks under the patient guidance of a human diplomat. "For the better, I think," Theo replied, "though I'm still not sure if they fear us or admire us." "Probably both," Miranda said. "Just like most diplomatic relationships." The ultimate validation came 6 months later, when Miranda was summoned to the Arbiter's private chambers. The Arbiter, a being of indeterminate species who had held their position for over 2 centuries, rarely granted personal audiences. Ambassador Reeves, the Arbiter, greeted her, using her new title. "Your innovations have created both stability and upheaval in our diplomatic corps." "I hope the stability outweighs the upheaval," Miranda responded. "Indeed. Which is why the Council has voted to create a new position, High Commissioner for Interspecies Diplomatic Relations. We would like you to be the first to hold this office." Miranda blinked in surprise. "That's a great honor." "The position comes with certain privileges," the Arbiter continued, "including the right to make direct eye contact in all diplomatic settings without prior permission." Miranda couldn't help laughing. "I didn't realize I needed permission." "You didn't ask for it, which is precisely why you're effective," the Arbiter said, their voice containing what might have been amusement. "Humans persistently do what should not work, and somehow transform failure into success." At her formal investiture ceremony, Miranda found herself standing before representatives of every Confederation species, even the traditionally reclusive ones who rarely appeared in public. "As I accept this position," she addressed the assembly, "I want to acknowledge that effective diplomacy isn't about being feared or using psychological tactics. It's about finding connection across our differences." The audience shifted uncomfortably at such direct sentimentality. That said, she continued with a slight smile, I do reserve the right to suggest karaoke if negotiations stall. A ripple of what passed for laughter in various species spread through the chamber. Even Velkor's rigid posture seemed to relax slightly. Later, at the reception, Miranda found herself face to face with her former adversary. "Aye, Commissioner." Velkor acknowledged stiffly. "It seems I underestimated the effectiveness of human methods." "No hard feelings about the Nagathi setup?" Miranda asked, deliberately making eye contact. Velkor's scales rippled in what might have been embarrassment. "I may have been traditional in my thinking." "Traditional isn't always bad," Miranda conceded. "In fact, I've been studying Hadrian negotiation rituals. Very elegant. Especially the ceremonial pauses." Velkor's eyes widened in surprise. "You appreciate our methods?" "The best diplomacy takes what works from everywhere," Miranda said, offering her hand in the human gesture of reconciliation. "Maybe we could learn from each other." After a moment's hesitation, Velkor extended his scaled appendage to complete the handshake, though he still flinched slightly at the directness of the contact. Across the reception hall, Theo raised his glass in a toast to Miranda. They'd come a long way from that first disastrous coffee offering. And somewhere in the background, a Nagathi representative was teaching a group of junior diplomats the harmonics of a popular Earth song, with their particle form glowing with what could only be described as enthusiasm. The galaxy would never be the same. Terrifying or not, humanity's place in galactic diplomacy was now secured one direct question, shared meal, and karaoke song at a time.